Hey everybody. So it is time to move down and into the dermis. So the dermal layer. So we are done with the epidermis, which was the top, and now we're going to focus on everything down here, the dermis. So this is going to be the layer of skin. So by the way, you don't have to worry about these because this is all epidermis, right? So we're focusing on the dermal layer. So this is going to be the layer of skin that is really doing most of the stuff that we think the skin is doing behind the scenes. So this is going to be a location where you're going to see blood vessels because, like I said earlier, if you remember from a previous video, there are no blood vessels in the epidermis. However, we do know skin has blood because if you ever got a paper cut, which hopefully you didn't because those always stink, they're going to bleed, right? So with that said, below the epidermis, in the dermis, we're going to see blood vessels. Not only blood vessels, we're going to have nerve endings, so that's where we feel. We're going to have sweat glands, hair, nail roots. This is where everything's located whenever you think about skin, as far as all the stuff associated with the skin. So, that said, anytime you see blood, you know you passed the epidermis and you are now in the dermal layer. What are the components of the dermis? There are two main parts of the dermis, the papillary layer and the reticular layer. So, papillary layer. This is going to be an area with areolar tissue, and it is going to be the closest section to the epidermis. It is going to have projections moving towards the epidermis. Why is that? Well, that helps us by creating a ridge within our skin that is going to protrude and make it appear as though there are protrusions coming out of our skin so that we can grip onto things better. So that is why the papillary layer is so important, also known as our fingerprints. And not only that, this is where most of our white blood cells are going to be located, because if there ever is an injury and it goes past the epidermis and into the dermis, this is the top part of the dermis, so I mean, you might as well load it up, right? Load it up with those parts of your body that are going to fight off those foreign invaders. So that's why you're going to find white blood cells at the top layer, in the papillary layer. Just below that, we have our reticular layer, which is nice because it gives away what kind of tissue are made up of the reticular layer. They are going to be irregular connective tissue, reticular, irregular connective tissues. Remember, think about what irregular connective tissues are like. They're going to be dense, as you see here, and they're going to be irregular, meaning that they are not going in one direction. If you remember from our previous videos when we talked about this with connective tissues, if you have dense regular tissue, they're all going to go one direction, right? They're very strong in one direction. However, if we have dense irregular tissue, we're going to have those tissues going all over the place in many directions because your skin needs to be strong in multiple directions. So that said, this is where most of our connective tissues are going to be. This is what's going to give our skin the strength it needs so that it doesn't rip or tear or basically fall off. This is going to be one of the biggest parts of the dermis. This is going to be about 80% of the dermis. It's very large. So with that said, a couple other quick notes here. It's only about 1 to 2 millimeters thick. It does have the dermal papillae, like we mentioned before. It is going to bind to the epidermis. It's also going to bind to the muscle cells below, as well as to the subcutaneous layer, which we're going to get to. That is the third layer of skin. And irregular dense connective tissue, as mentioned. Nerve cells are going to be within there, blood, hair, and other glands. So it's a little summary of the dermal layer. Fun fact of the dermal layer, you probably heard this before, but if you are receiving a tattoo, if we look at our fun picture from previous, right, the needle needs to go past the epidermis and into the dermal layer. That's why it bleeds and it hurts so much if you've ever received one, because if the needle does not reach that layer, what's going to happen is eventually these skin cells are going to keep pushing forward with the ink, whatever doesn't make it far enough, and push them out. So in other words, if you don't hit the dermal layer within a few weeks, all that ink will go away. So just a little fun fact, I guess, at the end. If you have any questions on the dermal layer, please let me know. The next video is on the subcutaneous layer, just below it.